So episode 61 is a conversation between Yaron Brook and Andrés Guilarte, who both experienced socialism firsthand and will share their opinion on the ideology and the implementation thereof, how their perspective has shifted, and what Americans can learn from history and presence of other countries. Yaron is an Israeli-American entrepreneur, writer, and activist. He's an objectivist and the current chairman of the board at the Ayn Rand Institute. His parents were Jewish socialists who moved to Israel from South Africa. And when he was 16, a friend lent him a copy of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which led him to abandon socialism and embrace objectivism. Andrés is a political activist for the freedom of Venezuela. He spent his childhood supporting the socialist ideology before he realized that the system didn't work and caused starvation, blackouts, silenced and jailed those who dared to speak and criticized the government. And that's why Andrés had to leave his country, Venezuela, and is now living in the United States. So you have a very similar experience in that you both grew up in a socialist country. So my first sort of question, or how I would like to start the podcast, is what idea of socialism did you have when you were growing up? How did that compare to reality? What was life like in socialism? If you were to explain it to an American, what things would you highlight to sort of help them picture your childhood? Yaron, if you want to get started.
Sure. I mean, certainly the socialism I grew up with is very different than the one André grew up with, and Andrés was much worse. I had a great childhood, so I can't complain about my childhood in terms of those things. We were not persecuted, or there was no real limitations on free speech. There was no, I mean, the system was corrupt, but I don't think it affected directly anything that I experienced as growing up in Israel. I mean, the main thing you could observe in Israel was that people were relatively poor in spite of being quite intelligent and productive. The economy struggled. It still did okay, but it struggled. If you were an entrepreneur, it was very difficult to get a business off the ground. The labor union in Israel in those days basically was the largest employer in the country, so they owned the means of production. The labor union did, not so much the government, but of course they were in bed with the government, and so it was. To me, the appeal of socialism when I was a kid was much more kind of as a moral statement than as an economic reality, right? I mean, socialism just felt right. It felt right to take care of the poor. It felt right to to have somebody looking after everybody, kind of central planning, and it felt right. And I couldn't conceive of an option to expect that some people sacrifice, in their day-to-day lives, that ultimately altruism, this idea that you should live for other people. Well, what was the alternative? There was none. I couldn't think of one. The alternative seemed to be to abuse other people, and that wasn't right. So I accepted kind of the altruistic foundation of socialism. So I don't think at any point was socialism, and I lived in America during this period for a couple of years, and I hated America.
Why did you hate America?
Because it like every socialist, it was materialistic, and it was, and in a bad sense, and it was shallow. People were super shallow, particularly kids. I was a teenager in the 70s. I don't know how much you know about the 70s, probably very little, but it was a drug, sex, and rock and roll. And coming from Israel, which was a serious place, and we matured young, and we didn't know what drugs were. We barely knew what sex was, and rock and roll we got, but everything else was like very foreign to us. As you know, suddenly I was dropped into this world where you went into the bathroom and people were doing drugs in the bathroom in high school. That was very weird and unusual for me, and people are shallow and ignorant and stupid. And to a large extent, sadly, that's still true in America. So I associated that with capitalism. I associate meaning and, adulthood and being serious and with socialism. That all changed, of course, once I read Atlas Shrugged.
But how did, given the religious nature of the people in the region, how did they cope with socialism, which is an anti-religious ideology?
Israel is not religious. Israel is less religious than America. So Israel is a bifurcated state. You have today more so, but today you probably maybe have today, let's say 30% of the population is very religious. And then you probably have 40% of the population that are atheists. And then you have a bunch of people in the middle. Whereas in the US, 90% of the people consider themselves religious somewhat, and there's only a very small percentage of atheists. In Israel, everybody, not everybody in my class was an atheist, but almost everybody. When I said when I was a young kid, I'm an atheist, nobody was surprised, right? Everybody, it was like you had maybe an argument, but here in America, if you say when you're a kid, you're an atheist, people look at you like you're weird and strange, and they want to put you away in some hospital or something. So Israel's a much more secular society in many, many regards than America, or even parts. It's much more European in that sense than America is. And the founders of Israel, the people who actually founded the state, were atheists and were former communists. They were real socialists. These are people who left Russia before the Russian Revolution because they thought it wasn't moving towards communism fast enough.
Oh,
These
wow.
were people who then moved because Stalin and Lenin didn't represent communism right, and they wanted to make it real with virgin land in Palestine before there was an Israel. So the founders, Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, all the kind of legendary names associated with the founding of Israel, were all atheists, and they were all committed socialists, really committed socialists.
Okay, well said. Andrés, what's your perspective on your childhood?
Well, like Yaron was saying, it's of course there's many differences, but there is similarities. For example, I also had a great childhood, considering that I was born in 1994, and if you consider childhood my first 10 years, it was a normal life, because you have to take into account that even before Chavez actually demised the whole country, we were a classic middle class country.
Democracy.
Democracy in the track to become one of the most important economies in the world. At some point in the 70s, we were the top economy in Latin America, and even our GDP per capita was higher than Israel. So I was thankful that I was being able to born in a context where, even though I never met my father, I have a single mom that, in the context was so great that even though that you didn't need many things and many education to get a nice job and support your family. But everything started going down as soon as Chavez took power, and we had to see some elements of what is so particular about the Venezuelan socialism that for Americans it seems like it's so unreal. The first thing that we have to understand, and that's the way I look at it when I was in my late teenage years, which is when I actually started doing activism with the local socialist groups. It was basically resentment. That was the main anti-value that you could find anywhere. And speaking from the mouth of anyone that was a socialist in Venezuela, because we had a system before Hugo Chavez that it was a bipartisan system, where that you can find similarities with that here in the US. The same two political parties exchanging powers every so often. And there was a growing resentment from the lower class and parts of the middle class in the country towards the elites, because, things were not going well, especially what happened in the 80s and the 90s, where the, inflation was going up, crime was going up, and people saw in Chavez, an opportunity of an outsider. But most important, the main part of Chavez's speech was against that elite, against the Fourth Republic, which in Venezuelan history, the Chavez era is the Fifth Republic, which is the one we are right now. The Fourth Republic was the democratic era before Chavez. So he had this idea that, everything that was going down, everything that was every problem that people were having is because the elites didn't care about you. They didn't care about the poor people, the people from the hood, the people from the interior of the country. So there was a growing idea that beyond the actual ideology, it was a movement against something. And that's something that you see similar in absolutely every socialist country. You need to have an enemy for people to rally around and rally against that. So the enemy in the moment in Venezuela was the Fourth Republic, then it also became the U.S. until this day. Many people in the elite of the socialist regime in Venezuela, they blame everything to the U.S. So I was an impressible, teenage kid, which in those years, my mom was working for the government. So I also could see that because, my mom never had formal education. So most people in that situation, they just get a job from the government. So I could see that my mom was very dependent, that the government, the socialist regime was still in place, so she can keep her work with the government. So you find a kid in that situation that has all these energies coming from his family, from members of my family, members of the community, all the emotions that gather around the idea that, the most important thing in your life is just joining that movement and joining the fight for the moral land against the elites, against the rich people, against imperialism. And that is easy to impress a young student. And I see that here when I travel around the country giving the speeches in college campuses. There's always this idea that you're a rebel. You're a rebel against a system. What is that system? Many people don't know. In Venezuela, trust me, no one knew what the system they were against was, but they wanted to be part of something that was that. And Chavez was the leader of that cult of people. And of course, then you have the policies that you start seeing after 2006, especially, that how he started going against the freedom of speech, how he started closing some networks in Venezuela, putting in place controls of prices, controls of income, controls of currency. So every single policy that you see rinse and repeat in every socialist country, a plethora of social programs. And at some point, I was like, when I entered college in 2013, I came with this idea, I'm a rebel and I need to support the movement and the whole thing, but I actually never thought about it deeply. As soon as I entered college, I started meeting other people, and I realized that no one else was part of this supposed movement that was part of the model land, and I start feeling like an idiot. And like all these people that had different education in their lives, they didn't went through the public system like I did. They had parents that were not involved in the movement, and they just had different ideas and different perspectives of the world. And I started, meeting friends that they introduced me to several items like, The Morality of Capitalism, which is a handbook that the Students for Liberty created, edited by Tom Palmer. That was the first book I ever read about economic policy, different from the socialist idea. And I was like mind blown. I was flabbergasted by the ideas that were there, because I never understood that was something else besides that. And it was mainly that the people that I knew in college were the ones that opened my mind that there is a world out there that they're not teaching you in your community, your family, and the education system in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. So when Chavez was rising to power, was it in the 98, 99 era? Were people against the elites per se, or were they against democracy?
Against the elites. No one, trust me, no one actually knew what democracy was, because Venezuela, by the time Chavez took power, only had 40 years of democracy, which started in the late 50s, after we toppled the last dictator in the country. So the actual idea of democracy, of the institutions of democracy, to how democracy feeds a republic, that those were not ideas in the Venezuelan culture, and still to this day, people don't have those ideas. So Chavez didn't rally against democracy; he rallied against the elite, and it was great for him because he was an outsider. No one knew who this guy was. He did some terrible things before going to power. He did a coup against the government. No one cared he did a coup, because they only care that this is a new guy. He's not part of the same. And if you look at the candidates of that time, Chavez and the other people, they were a bunch of old white dudes from the same elite from Venezuela, and people were tired about that. And that's something that I always tell people. It's not just Chavez. It's how the countries, the elites and the governments before Chavez, how they didn't actually care about, creating a democratic culture in the country, and they just care about reaching power. And eventually someone like Chavez also reached power, and he was not democratic.
Mm-hmm. You said, Andrés, that Chavez was limiting freedom of press, freedom of speech heavily. But Yaron, in Israel, you said that limiting of free speech wasn't very common. How is it that the system lasted so long and that dissenters were able to exist there without any consequences?
I don't know. I think that Israel was committed to democracy in a way, and it had established certain institutions, and there was enough counterbalance to the socialists that, and they never had a character like Chavez. They never had a charismatic leader who rallied them. And so there's something about I think the way Israel politically was structured. Look, the other aspect with Israel which is different than Venezuela. Israel was under constant threat of annihilation. Right? It was during this period, everybody thought Israel was not going to survive. Right? It was facing the armies of 5, 7, 9 Arab countries, way outnumbered, much richer, and so there was a certain unity within Israel, committed to both some form of democracy, some form of individual liberty, in spite of the kind of the economic socialism that was inspired, as a prerequisite for fighting and for defending this country against a real enemy.
Mm-hmm. So it was mainly, books and theory that convinced you that socialism wasn't good, or was it lived experience?
No, it was books. It
was
books. No question. I mean, I read Atlas Shrugged, and look, the real issue was that Ayn Rand doesn't say, look, socialism doesn't work, or it's bad economics, or you get less production, or something like that. She says it's immoral. It's wrong at the very root of it. That fundamentally your life is yours to live on your terms, using your mind, based on your judgment. And you're not supposed to live for the group, right? You're supposed to live for you. And socialism, and in Israel, the collectivism and the nationalism, were all oriented towards your life doesn't belong to you. Your life, it belongs to the group. And that's what I rejected. It's only much later that I understood, and you can also become richer, and capitalism is more efficient. But that wasn't what attracted me. What really attracted me was the moral argument, the ethical argument that basically says, my life is mine. I should be able to live it how I choose. And if I want to start a company, or if I don't want to join the army, or if I want to go and do something else, I should be able to decide my fate. It's my responsibility, not anybody's else. My life doesn't belong to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Andrés, did you feel the same, that the moral argument outweighed the economic argument?
Well, in Venezuela was, for me, it was different, the process, because I did start feeling very personally the consequences of socialism before I actually started going to the books. We're talking about 2012. You start seeing, and it started getting worse every year. Shortage of water. It becomes normal for you that you can only shower twice a week, and you fill your bathtub with water, which is something my mom is doing currently. She did it this morning. Yeah, she's in Venezuela. You fill your bathtub with water, and that's the water you have until there's more water, and that's the one you use to do dishes. That's the one you use to shower. That's the one you use for everything. So, seeing those kind of things, empty shelves, your family suffering, friends suffering. When you start seeing those things, you before you go to the idea, you just realize there's something wrong in the system. There's just something that is not going on. Now, some people in Venezuela assume that because they let the propaganda to work, is that all those problems is because the empire, it's the U.S., the sanctions. And
they still believe that, even after so many years of decline?
Oh, yeah, of course. There's people in Venezuela today that they still feel that the real reasons why things are going wrong in the country is sanctions. And even more today, actually, than before, because there's, thanks to many of the things that Maduro has been doing, which is basically money laundering, they have been able to have bubbles of economic improvement in places like in Caracas and other places in Venezuela. So there's people saying, well, now, for example, in Caracas, now we have good things here, and shelves are getting better. but the actual problems are so the actual problems are not the government, it's the sanctions. So there's still people that believe that. But going back to the point, where I was seeing that experiences, and then I started reading books, and then I started reading, not only reading, but seeing, you know, in Venezuela, we didn't have access a lot to books. I had to record to PDF and all of that. But I also used to watch a lot of speeches, you know, Milton's, those famous Friedman speeches in his college campuses, you know, explaining what money is, explaining what individualism is. And those were ideas that I love because, you know, I at least personally, I always wanted to have more in life. I'm a very ambitious person. So it's like, if I have one piece of bread today, I want to have two tomorrow. I want to have three the day after that. But in socialist countries, you have to just satisfy with the one piece of bread you have, because you have to be thankful for the motherland, and because we're in the middle of a war against the empire. So one piece of bread is enough for you, comrade. So I just never liked that. And people around me, family members, friends, they were fine with that. They were fine with just setting a limit to your potential as a person, setting a limit to your potential as in your future and your dreams. And for me, it was just, there's no point in life in that. You know, what's the point in life if, and this is me with 15 years old, what's the point in life is, this is what it's going to be. You know, I'm just going to be struggling with water, struggling with food, with money. I will never be able to, you know, have savings, credit cards, whatever, travel around the world, be a better person, you know, be rich, whatever. That's just unthinkable for anyone right now as a teenager in Venezuela. And I just couldn't handle that. So I realized that the only system that just allows you to do that is the system in place where people can actually do that in the US, in Europe, in other countries around the world, which is capitalism. Is the idea that you can be an individual and whoever you want to be. No, it doesn't matter what other people think. You can be whoever you want to be. That's impossible in Venezuela.
So given the strong historic record of socialism and how it doesn't work, why does socialism still appeal to so many young people, especially in America today? Yaron, you want to take that on?
Yeah, I think it's because they perceive it as moral and they perceive it as an ideal. And it's never been, other than Ayn Rand, nobody's ever challenged that it's a moral ideal. It's this, you know, Marx has this beautiful sections where, you know, after all the communist revolutions and dictatorships and some stuff happens and, you know, few people die and so on. But at the end, there's this wonderful utopia. We all go to the Garden of Eden and we all have everything we need and life is just amazing and beautiful. And everybody's taken care of and there's no inequality. Everybody's the same. And it's just, and that moral ideal of everybody being equal, everybody being the same, everybody taken care of at the expense of whom nobody cares. That moral ideal really hasn't been challenged. We challenge socialism on the economic issue, but that's not very inspiring. Like supply and demand graphs don't get people really excited. But if you really if you think about the emotion that these people bring to it, and again, the culture is filled with an altruism. The culture tells you that your life is not yours fundamentally, even in America. And I don't think America's capitalist. I think we're far, far from capitalism. We're not socialist, but we're not capitalist. In the world in which we live today, we say, well, we want a little bit of socialism, right? We'll have socialized medicine if you're over 65, called Medicare, but that's socialized medicine. But we don't want it for under 65 for some.
So like Yaron was saying, yes, I don't think the US is a capitalist country because you have a plethora of social programs and socialist process from the government in place.
Like Medicare, Medicaid.
Yeah, Medicare and other food programs, and you have many systems.
But now, wouldn't we argue that there's no capitalistic country? Like every country has some kind of socialism.
Because every country has a mix, and I believe that you can't just let theory and idealistic views of society make choices for you. I mean, you have to go with reality in every country. So if in the context we're living, a socialist program works alongside other free market policies. Well, maybe that's what you have to do in the context you are. So in the future, you can arrive to a better context where you can have more economic policies. So, for example, you can't do it in the U.S. You know, you go to a poor neighborhood, and you have people that's all they have known. You know, poor class of people which is real. We still believe that classes are not real. If people believe that they're part of a class, a poor class, then the classes are real. So that's what we have to understand. As long as people believe in an idea, that idea is real. So people that have gone through an education system that has never actually uplifted them with the idea that they can be someone else, that can be someone better, just keep telling them that the reason they're that is because the society is a sum zero game. You know, it's because if they're millionaires, then you're poor. And that's just the way it is. It's not like you can move in society. You know, you have to subtract from the millionaires in order for you to gain more. That's a zero-sum game. And some people actually believe that. Just a quick example, what we saw recently with the submarine here about the Titanic. You go to social media and you see that in the comments of people that I don't care about these people dying because they're millionaires. I don't care about or billionaires. I don't care about this. Or I only sympathize with the 19-year-old because there's no blame for him because it's a young kid. So you see people and that's fair. There's people that they think that if you're rich you're evil, and you know you deserve whatever comes for you, independently if these people knew they're rich or not. We're talking about people dying. And that happens in many places around the U.S. So you have a society where you can't deny the fact that the reality in place is that you may need some programs for people to start moving away from an economic to a better economic terms. Because imagine you go to a very poor neighborhood here, you tell them, well, we're gonna erase Medicare. We're gonna erase, you know, college help. We're gonna implement full school choice here. So the local program that you have in your public college here or public high school, whatever, that is gonna be gone. There's not gonna be receiving more funds from the government. And I support school choice. I support less government programs. I support all of that. But because the theory is great, doesn't mean that people are going to support you if you go and tell them with that. So I think that's the main problem that you see in activists, not only capitalist activists, but people from libertarianism and everything, is that they love their ideas, which is great. You know, you love capitalism, you know, libertarianism, and you know, you love objectivism, and you love all of that. But people don't eat with theories. People we eat food, and they need money in their pockets, and they need to see real things happening. You see, so you go with the books in hand to a poor neighborhood and tell them about theory. No one's gonna pay attention to you. That just doesn't happen. So I think that's the main problem in the U.S. For people that want to get a more free market country, a more capitalist country, that they just are disconnected from the reality of different people having different struggles, and that's just a reality.
It's sort of counterintuitive to me to see that the people who are advocating for socialism the most are the elite class, are the rich students or young people, right? The ones who have everything they could ever wish for are the ones who want socialism, and the poor ones who have nothing, who don't go to Harvard or Yale or Stanford, all these elite colleges, do realize that capitalism is the way to go, that the only way they can rise up the ladder is through free markets and this framework. So
yeah.
So if obviously democracy and capitalism. Hi, Yaron, good to have you back.
Hey, my internet keeps going out. I apologize.
No worries.
No
Weird.
worries. Do you want to finish your answer? Why does socialism appeal to young Americans?
Yeah, I mean, so we grow up in a world where the expectation is both from religion and for secular authorities that, you know, morality is about sacrificing for other people. And to be really noble, to be a hero from a moral perspective, is to sacrifice a lot for other people. And then the socialist comes around and says, look, capitalism's incompatible with that. Capitalism's all about people going about their business and pursuing their own happiness and being self-interested. Socialism is the true altruistic economic political system. In socialism, you really do sacrifice. So come join our movement where you can be truly moral, where you can live up to those Christian and secular ideals of sacrifice for the group, sacrifice for the weak, sacrifice for whatever group is being is suffering right now, and so it has a certain appeal if you accept altruism. And this is again why Ayn Rand had such a profound impact on me, and I think why in the battle against socialism you need Ayn Rand, and that is you need an alternative to altruism. You need a moral code that says, no, your life is not meant to be as a sacrificial animal to whoever is suffering or whoever is in need out there. Your life is yours. And the only political system that respects the idea of your life is yours, is capitalism.
So you don't think that there perhaps could be a better system that's not capitalism, that's not socialism, that better fulfills the needs of humanity or aligns with our values?
No, not if we properly understand what capitalism is. If capitalism is the system that basically leaves us all free, where the government's only job is the protection of individual rights, where there's no redistribution of wealth, there's no government intervention in our social lives, in our in our economic lives, what can be better than that? Freedom. I mean, capitalism equals freedom. So you can't get better than freedom. Every other system says, okay, you can be free over here, but not over there. You can be free in this part of your life, in your bedroom, but not in the boardroom. You can be free in the boardroom, but not in your bedroom. Every other political system wants a little bit of you. And today we live in America, which is a mixed economy. It has some freedoms. They let you can go to the mall, you can buy whatever you want. But when you work, they take 50% of your income out of your check. Or if you want to start a business, they heavily regulate it and control it. If you want to take a medication that hasn't been approved by a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., then you cannot, even, no matter what your condition is. If you want to have a vaccine, you have to wait until it's approved by the bureaucrats. And if you want to take a recreational drug, not that I'm for that, you have to, I wouldn't call them recreational drugs, destructive drugs, but people should be able to destroy their lives if they want to. You have to get approval from you, or you can't get approval. We live by permission in so much of our lives. That's not capitalism. That's not freedom. And that's not a human ideal. So America's was in its founding in the right direction, but we've moved a long way from there. And we, in that sense, I think, and I know this is a little shocking, I think we're closer to Venezuela than we are to true capitalism. True capitalism is such a thing that I don't think people can even imagine how amazing it is. But that's a direction we should be heading. We're heading towards Venezuela instead.
Well said. Andrés, I know you have to jump off. So last question, if I can. How can we make the system in Venezuela collapse? And it's surprising to me it hasn't collapsed, because if you look at history, in the Soviet Union, you had protests in Hungary in 1956, which I think would have succeeded had it not been for the power of the Eastern Bloc, which was a congregation of many countries. The Prague Spring in 1968, in my country, I think would have succeeded had it not been for the Warsaw Pact and the invasion in August 1968. So Venezuela is just one country. Why is it that it's still holding tight in there?
Well, that's the main problem. It's not just one country. There's two key factors here. First, precisely because many countries failed before, these countries will now learn from the mistakes of those countries. When I mean these countries, the answer to the second question, why Venezuela is not alone. You have Cuba, which is the main factor of why Venezuela is still holding up, and why even Venezuela got to the collapse that it is right now. You have Cuba, you have Venezuela, you have a whole criminal system in Latin America that is supported both by Cuba and Venezuela, and they got to power in Colombia, they got to power again in Brazil, they have power in Argentina, they got power in Peru, but that didn't happen any longer. So there is a whole system in Latin America that is tied to Venezuela and Cuba. You go outside of America, then you have You have other countries that are supporting Venezuela. You have Iran, you have Russia, you have Turkey, you have more and more countries that are not directly supporting it, but are also supporting the system. Then you go further, you have way more. You have China. We own so much money to China in Venezuela. Like, so many of our industries are basically owned for life for China. And you have so many allies around that. That's one of the key reasons why Venezuela hasn't collapsed by the pressure of the international community, and why they have been so efficient in repressing people, in keeping a very strong intelligence system in Venezuela. Whenever things go really bad economically, you see support from Iran, shipments of food, which can be expired or not, but it still is shipments of food. You see support from Russia with weapons and intelligence. You see support from China with money. You see support from Turkey with food. You see support from Mexico too, so it's another country that I miss in Latin America, with food. So, and you see support from Cuba and absolutely everything else. So we don't have just one country since many decades ago, since the start of the Cuban Revolution. This is what Fidel Castro wanted. They want an international system of allies of communism and socialism. It's basically the evil alliance of today. So Venezuela is not alone. It can be excluded from many international systems, but Venezuela is far from being alone. And any kind of change you want to make inside in Venezuela or from the outside has to understand that system is in place, that criminal international system is in place. So that's why it's so difficult to collapse Venezuela, because whenever they're in trouble, there is an economic package coming from one of the allies. Anytime that we try to do big, huge protests in Venezuela, they get equipment, they get support from other countries. There will never be anything happening in the United Nations because you have China and Russia there. Well, nothing happens ever in the United Nations for anything, but that's one of the reasons why it doesn't in Venezuela. Nothing happens in the Organization of American States because you have Mexico, you have other countries that are supporting Venezuela. So that's the main thing that I always tell people here in America. Hey, well, why Venezuela is not collapsing if you have people eating garbage from the street, 7 million plus Venezuelans left the country, I'm one of them. Why it hasn't collapsed? Because Venezuela is not alone. And he won't be alone in a long time until we start understanding that this is not Venezuela's problem. It's not a regional problem. It's a worldwide problem, that we need the same alliance in the other side to defeat this alliance. There's just no other way you're going to be able to solve Venezuela's problem without solving Cuba's problem. You won't be able to solve Cuba's problem without solving Venezuela's problem. And it's something really difficult to do. And let's see if that happens in the future.
So what I want to discuss is mental health pandemic in America, which is huge. The increase in suicides is really unheard of in a democratic capitalistic country. Do you think that people are on average happier now than they were in the Soviet Union or in Israel under socialism?
Oh yeah, well, people. What does people mean, right? I think most people are, without question. There's no question that there's some people that are clinically depressed. I think there's a lot of suicide. There's a lot of indirect suicide. Alcoholism is quite high in the United States. People die from liver and kidney failure. People are dying from drug overdose. And I think a lot of that is, they call them deaths of despair, people in despair. But the same is true in the Soviet Union. People were dying of alcoholism and alcohol poisoning. It just wasn't categorized in any way. And there
were less suicides. I don't think people just kill themselves because
I think there might be, but America is a unique culture, and it's why people get depressed here more. America is ambitious. Americans are ambitious. They want a lot for themselves. Americans want to be happy. They do these surveys about happiness, and they discover that people in Scandinavia are the happiest people in the world.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They just have a very low standard for what happiness is. For them to be comfortable and satisfied, that's happy. So everybody's happy because everybody's comfortable and satisfied. But if you're ambitious and you want great things in your life and you want to be happy with a capital H, you want to be really happy, that requires real ambition, and comfort and satisfaction just is not enough. So Americans don't rank high in happiness because they're ambitious. They want stuff. But the downside of ambition is when you create an environment where people are ambitious, but they're not allowed to fulfill that ambition, then they crash. And that crash leads to this mental health, and that crash leads to these suicidal, what's the point in life? If I can't attain the mountaintop, then what's the point in life? And the only reason I believe that they can't attain the mountaintop is because our politicians and our intellectuals are slowly destroying the capacity of people to rise up, for example, poverty, or to become rich, even if they're born poor, or for working class people to attain a successful middle class. They're also lying to them constantly. So if you look at who is depressed, who commits suicide, who the deaths of despair, it's white, middle-aged, working class men, right? They're the ones who are really in trouble. And they're the ones who've been lied to the most. They're the ones who are told your jobs are coming back. Don't worry, if you're a steel worker, your jobs are coming. I mean, they're not coming back. And then they're not, they have this ambition, but they're not given the tools to exercise it. One of those tools would be get in a car, move to where the jobs are. There are plenty of jobs in Texas. You move to Austin. There are plenty of jobs I always use this example because nobody believes me, but there are lots and lots of jobs in Northwest Arkansas. Lots of jobs in Northwest Arkansas. It's where Walmart is, and it's a massively growing community.
Is it the Ozarks, the Ozark Mountains?
No, it's the other side of Arkansas.
The other side.
So and there are tons of jobs there. It used to be in America that people moved to where the jobs are. People moved to where the opportunities are. If you look at patterns of movement, people don't move anymore. I mean, there's a movement in California to Texas, but that's about it. But there's not a lot of movement. So a lot of that has to do with the welfare state. If I have welfare benefits in Ohio, if I move to Arkansas, I lose them. And can I find a job? Probably, but will the job pay as much as the welfare? And I have to get in my car. And I was told the jobs are coming back. So any day now, I'll have my manufacturing job again. So the welfare state has destroyed this capacity to advance. The regulatory state is destroyed it. And then, of course, the lying and not being truthful with people has made, when they fall, has made it much more painful.
Are you based in California or Texas?
I live in Puerto Rico.
Oh, Puerto Rico. Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
I've lived here for 5.5 years. I used to live in California. So when I moved out of California, I didn't go to Texas. I went all the way to Puerto Rico.
Makes sense. Well, talking about California and talking about the individualistic framework, the messaging that's coming from Hollywood is be selfish, love yourself, focus on yourself and nothing else. I think that messaging is actually very negative to people's mental health, and it leads them to not make connections, not have friends, not have families, right? Rely on therapists for support. Don't you think that it perhaps is time to move away from that a little bit? And I
think it's time to move away from the Hollywood message, but I don't think that's the Hollywood message at all. I mean, almost all the movies I see out of Hollywood is the importance of family and the importance of community and the importance of relationships. I mean, you tell me which movies project it, tell people they should be selfish. But the other aspect of this is, what does it mean to be selfish? See, I believe I'm selfish, but for me, selfishness means be rational, really think about what's in my interest, what will lead to my happiness. It's not about emotions. Hollywood is all about emotions. It's all about pathos. It's all about do what you feel like doing, do what's cool, do what the cool kids do what other people do, conform. It's all about conformity at the end of the day. I wish Hollywood was projecting a message of real selfishness, rational selfishness, think long-term, plan a life, be productive, create wealth. That's real selfishness. What they promote is either party all the time and glamour and beauty and superficiality like that, or it's all about family or the latest, coolest, I don't know, politically correct, woke thing you're supposed to do, right? But there's no real individualism in the sense of living, in a sense of really making something of your life. That's kind of boring. I mean, how many movies are there about successful entrepreneurs? How many movies are there about successful financiers and the good guys, right? There are lots of successful entrepreneurs in the movies, but they're always the murderers or the bad guys or the crooks or the thieves or
the frauds,
right?
Yeah.
But how many are there which celebrate entrepreneurship or celebrate business or celebrate finance or celebrate tech? So it's very negative towards real individualism, real pursuit of your own happiness, real self-interest.
But then if we're truly individualistic, how do we solve the larger societal problems, like climate change, for example, right? If we just focus on ourselves and our short-term interests.
Climate change is going to affect me, right? So I
don't think so. I don't think necessarily it's going to affect you.
I don't really care that much. Let my rich children deal with climate change. I mean, it's one of the problems with the whole debate about climate change. We don't really have perspective on it. The reality of climate change is that most of the damage is in the distant future. And in the distant future, if we're free and if we keep using carbon fuels, we'll be so much richer than we are today that it'll be a lot easier to deal with the problem in 50 years than it is right now. And people don't have the proper perspective to, what a lot of the Gretas of the world, right? What they want to do is make us poor now so that we can deal with climate change.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a false alternative. We're not all going to die in 10 years and there's zero reason to be poor. But look, to the extent that there are problems that require people to act together, then if it's a real problem and it's going to affect me or my children, I care about my children, the life they have, then let's get together and solve the problem. But it's never appropriate to solve a problem with coercion and force. It's never appropriate to solve a problem by putting a gun to people's head. You want to solve the problem? Use persuasion, use incentives. Don't use force. It's never right. You're always going to get you're always going to get a worse outcome. So if you can convince everybody that climate change is a real problem and is threatening their lives or their children's lives, and then you can create entrepreneurs, then go out and create technologies that can solve the problems that we need to solve, then people will embrace that, even if it costs a little bit more, because you've convinced them that embracing these technologies is better for them. The problem is now that people are cynical about climate change because force is being used against them. They're being told they have to. And if they don't have any choice. They're going to be forced to do it. And that again, will create bigger problems than climate change.
Yes, that alarmism is very dangerous.
And by the way, I think that's a big part of the mental health problem. Look, if you're growing up as a kid, I remember when my kids were, this is a long time ago, my kids were in kindergarten, right? And they used to get these books that used to say, human beings by their nature destroy the planet. They don't deserve to, in a sense, they don't deserve to be alive. They kill penguins, cute little penguins. And if once they destroy this planet, maybe we'll go to another planet, but then we'll destroy that planet just as much. And it's like this ugly, horrible view of mankind. And a lot of the messages, you and your parents are responsible. You consume this stuff. You use electricity. Your parents drive a car. You're all evil. That is not a good way to raise happy, successful children, right? By inflicting. It's a very religious way, by the way, because it's original sin, right? And now if you're straight or if you're white or now you've got that guilt, right? You're privileged, right? So now you've got that guilt. So we raise kids. We refuse to give up on Christianity. We keep finding new ways of original sin. And again, that's not healthy for people. So I think a lot of the mental health issues are the consequence of the hysteria over climate change, which has been going on for 30 years. Everybody thinks it's new, but I remember early 90s, it was already starting.
It was called global warming back then.
Yeah, global warming. And then it didn't warm as much as they thought it would. So they called it climate change. And climate will always change. So they're always going to be right. They're not going to fail that way. Of course, I remember global cooling, which was the panic in the 70s. And the population bomb, which was we were supposed to hundreds of millions of people were going to die of starvation in Europe because there was not going to be enough food. So I mean, these hysterias come and go, but this one is stuck, and this one they indoctrinate kids with from a very young age, and I think that has a lot to do with the mental health problems that teenagers have. Is they're growing up with this guilt just because they're alive.
But why is it? Why do we have the need to panic about things? Like, are humans just programmed to, be on the edge and thinking that we're going to die out? Or
no, because I think that we're not programmed, but our culture for 2000. I think this is Christianity. I mean, I really think it's Christianity. Christianity has, for 2,000 years now, kept telling us we have original sin. We're something really, really flawed about us, that the very means by which we procreate, sex, is fundamentally evil. They tell us, Christianity also says that the day of reckoning is coming. There's going to be this Armageddon. Everything's going to implode. The good guys will go to heaven. The bad guys go to hell. And it's going to be this big thing. And any day it's going to happen. They'd be telling us, right? And I think that's really ingrained in our culture. So even though, let's say in Europe, Europeans have given up on religion, that is still there, right? So it's not in our genes, but it's in our cultural DNA. It's in our culture. And to replace that, we actually have to have a positive set of values to replace Christianity. What we don't, so Europe rejected Christianity and adopted nothing, right? Whatever. And what we need is a positive set of values. What we need is a reason for people to thrive and succeed and want to thrive and succeed. We want to give them positive values and a positive view of the world. Until we get that, these cultural phenomena will continue. But yeah, there's definitely a doomsday, the end of the world is nigh, that comes from, I think, Christianity and maybe even earlier religions. That's part of the culture. And unless we change the way we think about the world, that's not going to go away. And original sin is a very, very, very damaging concept.
Effective altruism is a very popular theory these days that a lot of young people associate with. Are you familiar with William McCaskill, a Scottish philosopher? Yeah. So he wrote a book on it. I think he's the founding father or whatever.
The founding father is Peter. The founding father is Peter Singer.
Peter Singer.
Peter Singer is the founding
Australian,
father. McCaskill,
right?
The Australian who taught at Oxford. McCaskill's at Oxford. McCaskill, in a sense, is one of Peter Singer's students, but he's taken it the next level, and he's like
he worked with SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, and
yes, SBF maybe has made effective altruism a little less popular.
Yes. Well, what surprises me is that Elon Musk, obviously one of the most impactful human beings, promoted his book and promoted this movement. So my question to you is he really selfless, or what is his selfish motive to do all these things that he's doing, sleep on the factory floor, work all the time?
He loves it.
He loves it?
You get it from Elon Musk. He loves sleeping on the floor because what he loves is the production. He loves creating. He loves building. He loves these things. Now, Elon Musk is a complex character. He's got all kinds of things going on in that head of his. But there's no question he loves the process. He loves the entrepreneurial activity. He loves the production. He loves making these decisions. I think he's confused about effective altruism. Certainly, I think he's also very confused about politics and about a lot of things. But there's no question he loves the act of building things and producing things. I wish he stuck to that and stopped tweeting. He would be a lot better. But I don't think it's an effective altruism. I think for a lot of people, effective altruism is a virtue signal. it tells the world and it tells themselves that they're okay, that they're good guys, because altruism is so ingrained in the culture. You have to be, and effective altruism seems like the most reasonable in our modern times of form of altruism. It's time we chucked the whole thing out and put it in the dustbin of history and got rid of every form of altruism. They're all wrong. And I think Elon Musk would be happier and better and more thoughtful if he actually embraced kind of Ayn Rand's ideas about morality.
I think it just feeds into the narrative and what's popular these days. Saying that you're selfish is a pejorative, and it sort of puts shame on you. Like, I'm selfish. Oh my God. Shame on you.
I would never say I'm selfish outside of a context, right? Because people associate selfishness with something. So, I pursue my self-interest, using rationality and always thinking about the long term. Long term is my life, not like McCaskill's long term, which is 30,000 years in the future. My life, my kids' lives, I can project maybe that. But the reality is, what do I think about 1,000 years from today? Nothing. I don't think about it. It doesn't bother me. I don't care. I'm a little jealous because I think they're going to be amazing things 1,000 years from now, and I'm sorry I'm going to miss it. That's about it. That's the only relationship I have with 1,000 years from now.
Well said. What is your opinion on charities? Do you think that they allocate resources effectively? If not, what other structures should we create?
I think charities are very difficult because, I'm not against charity per se, but I think most charities, because they don't understand the fundamentals of economics and they don't understand how cultures and economies work, often do a lot more harm than good. I remember there was the charity. Remember, if you bought a pair of shoes, like they would send a pair of shoes to country X, to Haiti or somewhere, they would send a pair of shoes. Now
it's plant a tree or something. You buy something and they plant a tree.
But there was a period where it was something about shoes and they would send shoes. And so they would send shoes. I can't remember what country it was, but what happened was that suddenly all these free shoes showed up. Guess who lost their business? All the people who made shoes in that country. There was the same thing happen in Haiti. So after like the earthquake, everybody thought it was a great idea to send solar panels to Haiti. But it turned out that there was a small solar panel industry in Haiti producing solar panels, and it drove them out of business. So instead of thinking about, look, the best charity you can offer is jobs, is work, for people who can work. So the best charity you could offer is go into these countries and invest in these countries. As long as that's feasible, given the state of the legal system. And if it's not feasible, then work to change that. So I think the best charities in the world, the charities that are trying to change the political systems in places like Africa, trying to bring the institutions that allow for progress and growth and economic success. Haiti's not poor because of lack of charity. Haiti's poor because of awful governance and an awful political system. And it needs to be completely scrapped and start over. And the corruption that exists in Haiti. So I think those are much more important things. And then look, I love charities that help, that fund, cancer research, particularly for kids, and that fund all kinds of, I think there are a lot of things that charity can do and should be focused on, but it needs to have this understanding of the impact they're having on people and the impact they're having on communities and on economies. Don't go in blind and just hand out checks. That almost always ends badly.
I mean, a good example of that is us sending checks to Israel. 4 billion or how many go in foreign aid to Israel, which are then used to purchase American goods and services.
Well, the whole thing is stupid. Israel is today considered a rich country. It's a developed country. It's a first world country. Why the hell does it need charity from the United States? It's absurd. But it's part of a deal that was struck years ago, and nobody wants to challenge it. And if you challenge it, sometimes they'll call you an anti-Semite. But no, Israel should not get any money from the United States. It should trade with the United States. It's a powerful country, and military. Sharing military technology makes sense because both countries have a lot in common. But beyond that, there shouldn't be any help to Israel.
I agree. Talking about the economy, are you worried about the level of U.S. debt, which is, I think, 130% of our GDP at this point?
Yeah, no, it's a disaster. It's hard to tell when and that's only the debt on paper, because the unfunded liabilities, the debt that we're going to accumulate because of Medicare and Social Security, is between 100 and 200 trillion dollars, and we have no way to pay for that, and nobody cares. Nobody seems to do anything about it. Everybody's pretending that they can kick the can down the road forever because they've succeeded so far.
But why does nobody care? Like, from a selfish perspective, shouldn't we care? It relates to our lives, our retirements.
Well, it relates to our lives and our retirement, but it also, the reality is that these deficits are hurting us now. My life today is I'm less wealthy, I'm less successful than I could be in a world where the government didn't have debt. Because the government's debt is, in a sense, a brake on economic growth and economic success. So it's not only that it hurts future generations, it does. It hurts me right now, every day. I am burdened with something that I shouldn't be burdened with. So bad economic policy hurts everybody who's willing to be productive. Anybody who's willing to work is hurt by the fact that the government is doing this. And then the only question is, when does it all collapse? And the problem with many of us is we always predict the collapse, and it hasn't happened yet. So people say, "Oh God, they're saying it's collapsing again," and then they push it out into the future. But at some point,
I mean, historically, I think 150% debt to GDP is the tipping point.
Well, again,
empires collapse.
In Japan, it's 230%. I don't think there's a tipping point. The tipping point will be when financial markets decide that the U.S. government is basically bankrupt. And when they decide that is hard to tell, partially because of the global role the dollar plays. So it's global markets. There's no alternative to the dollar. It's not like anybody wants to trade in yuan, in China's currency, and they don't want to trade in euros. So there's no alternative to the dollar. So that's a real problem. I
think when it comes to yuan, the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia have agreed to trade oil in yuan.
Yeah, so it's a tiny little fraction. They do it to make China feel good and to make the headlines. It doesn't matter economically. It's insignificant. So they can push this out for a long time. I think the way we suffer is, I believe that the United States economy could grow 5-6% a year. That means we could all become double our wealth, I don't know, in 15 years.
How do we do that?
Everything would double. And what's that?
How do we do that? How do we grow 6% per year?
Eliminate all the regulations, eliminate the taxation, or reduce taxation dramatically, simplify it, get the government out of allocating and picking winners and losers, allocating resources, deciding how to, what industries and how industries should function. Get out of the way. If we get out of the way and unleash the entrepreneurial spirits of this country, the sky's the limit. Right now, if we, when Trump was president, everybody said, "Oh, it's the greatest economy we ever have." We were growing 2%. It was pathetic. So, the difference between 2% and 5% seems like only 3%. But if over the last 100 years, the United States had grown 1% a year less in GDP, we would be poorer than Mexico. 1% less. Poorer than Mexico. So now we're growing 3% less than what our potential is. Now extrapolate how rich we could be in 100 years versus how rich we will be, or in 50 years or in 20 years. So we are losing, and we're losing our potential. Now the whole world is too. So relatively speaking, the United States is doing great, but in absolute terms, the United States is doing horrible. And that has to do with the mental health problems. If people are energized and excited and busy working and busy producing, and there's a lot of vibrancy, and the president of the United States is a positive guy who has a vision for the future and is excited and exciting, then people are less depressed. But if everybody's like, life sucks, the economy's barely growing, there are no jobs, wealth isn't increasing, my kids are going to be poorer than me, that's depressing.
there has been a significant, I would say, degradation of morals, which is, I would say, one of the reasons why the Roman Republic collapsed. So how can we get it back? How can we get people out of their comfort zones, excited about life, more productive? No one wants to work anymore, it seems, in America.
We want them to be more selfish, right? So selfish is properly understood, because if you're selfish, you want to take care of yourself. If you're selfish, you want to work. You want to produce. You don't want somebody else putting food on your table. You want to put the food on the table, because that's where pride comes from. And pride is a virtue, not a vice. You want to feel pride in your achievements, but you have to be able to achieve. So what we really need is people to have true self-esteem, kind of want to live a great life, want to be successful, and if they want all of that, then they might listen to a political leader who says, look, to do that, we need to liberate you. We need to phase out the welfare state. We need to actually empower you to be entrepreneurs and to live the best life that you can be, and to take jobs and to work hard. And you get to keep your money. We're not going to take 50% of your money anymore. We really have to empower people. Today, the welfare state is such that many people on welfare make as much as the lower middle class. So the lower middle class works hard and makes a living, and then somebody who doesn't work has the same level of income, and they're going, well, that's depressing. Why should I work hard? I could just leave. And that's why you have a lot of people who don't even look for work. They're sitting at home playing video games. If we can explain to young people that playing video games instead of working is self-destructive, not self-interested, it actually destroys the capacity for joy and happiness. That's the messaging. The messaging needs to be around the individual pursuit of happiness. It's in our Declaration of Independence. It's you as an individual have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, your happiness. That's the kind of ideal we need to project. And we need to educate young people to live that way. We educate them to be afraid, to be dependent on other people, to look for community, to look for a tribe, to look for other people to associate with and to depend on. That's not how you create a successful society. So it needs a real basic fundamental transformation.
What's the
which
one
you cannot
book
do
that,
with politics.
What's the
so
one
politics
book that,
is not the solution.
I agree. I think we have to make our government leaner. So to change this mindset of young generation, what is the book that you would recommend every young person reads?
The Fountainhead.
The Fountainhead. It's
and
like 900 pages or so.
Well, I was going to say Atlas Shrugged. It's 1,100 pages, 1,200 pages. Yes. I mean, one of the things that we got to get people to do is read. Reading is really, really good for you. And it's emotionally unbelievably rewarding. I mean, reading fiction, not nonfiction, fiction, and not listening, reading. It puts you in another universe. It's an experience that unfortunately many kids today don't have. But The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged are the books to read if we're going to save this world. Yeah,
well said. Well, we talked about productivity. Do you think that AI is going to make us more productive? Do you think it's going to be a net positive? I know you talked about it on your podcast last week.
I think I think it has the potential to make us to be hugely positive and make us unbelievably productive if it's allowed to do that. We're already seeing the European Union pass, suggest regulations to limit the scope. We're seeing Congress, who doesn't even know anything about computers. They don't understand one thing. The
average age is 62, I believe.
Yeah, but they will regulate AI. They understand AI well enough to regulate it. And unfortunately, we're seeing people like Elon Musk and some of the other founders of AI preaching catastrophism and encouraging the regulation of AI. So I'm very afraid, for the future, not because of AI. I'm not afraid of AI at all. I'm afraid of, the negativity that people have towards it. I'm much more in the Andreessen camp with regard to AI, which is that the possibilities are just amazing. And it might be that AI generates so much productivity boost that we grow at 3-4% in spite of the awful government that we have. That because of technology, I mean, we survive today because of technology. This economy thrives because of big tech. They hate big tech, but it does. and now we want to kill the thing that could really push us into the next stratosphere. No, so I'm very positive on AI if we allow it to, if we truly unleash it.
Well, I think the one danger that I see is with democracy and elections. You know, with AI, deepfake audio and video, how do you know what's real and what's relevant? Are you not afraid that AI could significantly impact the next elections?
Sure, although, you know, big deal, right? So we'll get Biden instead of Trump, or Trump instead of Biden. I mean, there's a choice for you.
Sure. Then it's not democracy. I think we're more.
Well, but you know, when you have choices as bad as those, I'm not sure I care that much about democracy for its own sake. But I mean, I think the deeper point is, yeah, I mean, there are going to be problems, and the solution is going to be AI, right? So some people are going to design AI that figures out which AI is telling you the truth and which AI is lying to you. I mean, how are we going to figure out what's a deep fake? We're going to figure out what's a deep fake by using AI to scan it and figure out what's being manipulated, what hasn't been manipulated. I don't.
But for that, we need regulation where content needs to have labels, and we need to know what's real and what's not real.
No, I mean, unless it's fraud or unless it's misrepresentation that's somehow a violation of somebody's rights, the market will take care of it. I have no problem. I mean, look at how many fact checkers have come out of the panic over misinformation. No, not all of them are good. Some are better than others. Most of them tilt in a particular political way. But imagine if we get deepfakes and stuff, there's going to be a lot more market. There's going to be a lot more need for fact checkers, and now there'll be a whole industry around that, and they'll be using AI. So no, let the market sort this out. I think the market will figure this out quite well.
Well, if you look at the reputation of fact checkers these days, especially on Twitter, it seems like no one trusts them. Elon Musk is, mocking Snopes and all these fact-checking misinformation.
Well, Snope just blew it with the submarine, so everybody's making fun of them over the submarine. But but look, but nobody trusts anybody right now. I mean, who trusts Elon Musk? I certainly don't. I know a lot of people don't. Who trusts Mark Zuckerberg? Who trusts anybody? I mean, we have today is a massive lack of trust, partially because we've given so much power to the government and they keep lying to us, and so we've lost trust in our government. Because of, I think, a bunch of different things. We've lost trust in the police. We've with the military in Afghanistan and Iraq, we've lost trust with the military. So whenever these institutions betray us, we really lose trust. And then we live in a culture in which people feel free to say whatever comes into their mind, completely emotionalistic. Nobody has to present facts and evidence and use logic. We live in a dying culture. And again, the solutions are not political. The solutions are not regulatory. The solutions are educational. We need to change the culture. We need to think about, what does it mean to present an argument? Because nobody presents an argument on Twitter. They yell at one another and they emote. Everybody emotes on Twitter, but they don't present an argument on Twitter. So, we need to go back or forward to where people respect argument, people respect thinking, people respect facts and reality.
Well, that's what this podcast is about, promoting a culture of open debate and tolerance of dissent.
I am not tolerant of all dissent, right? So some views are abhorrent, and I'm not tolerant of them. It doesn't mean I want to silence them. It means I think they're really, really evil ideas, and I don't want to listen to them, and I don't want to, have anything to do with them.
But that means you're tolerant. You don't respect them, but you tolerate that they exist. Well,
tolerance is a tricky concept. I'm politically tolerant of them. I'm not individually tolerant of them. Mm-hmm. If once I was at, I think this was at Fox. Yeah, we were waiting to do a John Stossel show, and I was in the green room at Fox, a bunch of libertarians standing around. Yeah. And in walks this guy, and somebody says he's a communist. And I said, "What do you mean he's a communist?" And I said, "No, he's a card-carrying member of the Communist Party." And I said, "That's evil. That's horrible. What a disgusting human being." And they were like, "No, he's kind of a nice guy." And I said, "I don't care if he's a nice guy. He is advocating an ideology that's killed tens, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world. He's responsible. You know, and for the deaths in the future of any communist regime that comes around. How can you be innocent and be a communist? You cannot. So it landed up that I challenged this guy, you know, and I called him. I called him on the thing, and everybody was standing around. Even the makeup people came out to watch this. I landed up having to debate him on Starsa. I didn't even know this was the guy I was debating on Starsa. But I don't try, you know, if somebody walked into my house and said, I'm a communist, I said, out. I don't want you in my house. Same thing if somebody walked into my house and said, I'm a Nazi. I don't want you in my house. I'm not tolerant of Nazis. Now, I don't believe you should go to jail. I don't believe the police should arrest you. But in my house, I won't tolerate it. And in a public forum, I will yell at you. I will call you out for what you really are. I will not. Well,
that's all acceptable. That's all within the First Amendment.
I agree. I'm a big fan of the First Amendment. But tolerance is a tricky word because we don't want to be morally tolerant. We want to be politically tolerant, but we don't want to be morally tolerant. We want to declare, I think some ideologies are evil and some people are evil. And I'm going to
That's a great distinction, political and moral tolerance.
Yeah.
I met Yoram Hazony at a conference a few weeks ago in Colorado. It was the Western Conservative Summit where he was promoting his new book, Conservatism.
Yep.
A rediscovery.
I have it somewhere here. Yeah.
Oh, you have it there already? Okay. I haven't read it yet. But he said, let me find it here. He said his last sentence was, if it's just about the freedom and not about the ties that bind me to my family, my parents, children, country, community, nation, if it's only about the individual doing whatever he or she wants, then what's the point of freedom? What's the point of freedom if you've lost the ability to use it for something that's truly worthwhile? How would you answer it?
Well, do you know I debated him?
I saw the Lex Fridman podcast. Yes,
but before the Lex Fridman podcast, the night before we debated at the University of Texas in Austin.
Oh, really?
So we were on stage in Austin. You can find the video of that. It's on my channel. It's in a few places on the internet, but it's certainly on my channel. So I will
research
on there. But my answer to that is, the point of freedom is so you can choose what values you want to pursue and use that freedom in any way you want to use it. Now, I think you shouldn't use it. I think it's a waste of a human life to use it in order to tie the bounds of family and whatever. I mean, we had bounds of family in the Dark Ages. Who cares? Some families are great. Let's tie those bounds. If you love your family, stay close to them and be friends with them and hang out with them and do amazing things with them. If you despise your family, move to another state, get away from them, and some families deserve to be despised. If you want to use some families do. I mean, there are parents that are awful, right?
Yeah.
If you want to pursue a career, then go pursue a career. If you want to have kids, go have kids. The beauty of freedom is you get to make the choices based on your values on what to do. And my only argument is do it rationally, do it in a way that is promoting your own long-term happiness. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. He wants to tell me what to do. He wants to tell me I have to have kids. He wants to tell me I need to sacrifice my life for the country by forcing me into the military. This is the thing about, they want to use coercion on you to tell you how to live and what to do, and because of his values. I want to leave people free. He can stay religious. He can stay in his community. He can stay and hang out. He can't not work and get subsidies from the government. That's what he cannot do. He can get from charity if he wants. And I'm not saying Yoram does that because he doesn't. He's hardworking. But there are many people in his Orthodox community who don't work, who get charity from the government, welfare from the government, and they expect it. That's the big conflict in Israel right now. Really? Yes, I mean, the big conflict in the government right now is how much should the government be supporting the ultra-Orthodox Jews not to work? God. And they don't serve in the army, right? But they want to send everybody else to serve in the army because they need to be protected and they need to be defended. So it's outrageous that they get to use their coercion and force to dictate their values on us. And when I say I want freedom, they think I want to force. You can't force freedom. people can do with their freedom what they want. He can have as many kids as he wants. He has quite a few. He can have as many kids as he wants. He can live for his family. He can live for the state. Just don't rope me into it.
Yeah. I mean, your concept of freedom is the negative one, freedom from interference. Some people interpret freedom in a positive sense, freedom to have education, have healthcare, have all these things.
I see my conception, it's a false dichotomy. They're not advocating for freedom because their freedom requires coercion. Their freedom requires force. I'm the only advocate for freedom. They're not advocating for freedom. And my advocacy for freedom is a positive advocacy for freedom. I want freedom so individuals can pursue their values based on their judgment. That's positive. I want them to be able to pursue their happiness. And in order to do that, I think a necessary requirement for that is the absence of coercion, the absence of force.
I completely agree. Well, I think that's a great end of the podcast.
This has been fun. Thanks for inviting me.
It was fun. It was a great discussion. Let me know if you're in Austin. And
I'll be in Austin a lot. I'm in Austin, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times a year. So
I saw you actually, was it last year or this year when you went, you did a lecture on China, I believe.
That was earlier this year. I did a lecture on China and Iran.
Yeah.
And then I was just in Austin a couple of weeks ago for some seminars that I participated in. And I'm sure I'll be back. I'm sure I'll be in Austin in the fall. So I'm in Austin a lot.
Let me know. Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time.